Hello everyone, it's the Ranter, and today I am going to be talking about Oswald Fiddlebender and how you can get Blightsteel Colossus out on turn 5 if everything goes well. So let's talk about Oswald Fiddlebender himself. You pay 1 white and tap him to sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact card with a mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice artifact mana value and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. So we're going to use Oswald Fiddlebender to search out Blightsteel Colossus. But what does Blightsteel Colossus do? Blightsteel Colossus is a trample, infect, and indestructible golem that's 11/11, and if he would be put into the graveyard, he would be put back into the deck. So he is a very powerful finisher if you get him onto the field. But as Oswald Fiddlebender says, that you can only get something that's 1 more than its casting cost. So how do I get a 12 mana golem onto the field? Well, that would be Scrapyard Recombiner, a artifact construct that is 3 mana that can tap, sacrifice an artifact, search your library for a construct card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And the construct you'll be searching for is Metalwork Colossus, a artifact that costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of a non-creature artifacts you control. And if he happens to get into the graveyard, you can sacrifice 2 artifacts, return Metalwork Colossus from your graveyard to your hand. So how does this all play out? On turn 1, you play 1 land. Turn 2, play another land and cast Oswald Fiddlebender. Turn 3, play another land, play a 2 mana artifact, and then sacrifice it with Oswald Fiddlebender, getting Scrapyard Recombiner. On turn 4, play another land, and sacrifice a artifact with Scrapyard Combiner to get Metalwork Colossus, and put it into our hand. Then sacrifice Scrapyard Recombiner with Oswald Fiddlebender to get a 4 mana artifact. Then put 2 artifacts onto the field that are mana rocks. Go to turn 5, play another land, and cast Metalwork Colossus for 8, since it's discounted by 3 for the 3 artifacts that you have on the field. Then sacrifice it with Oswald Fiddlebender with the 1 remaining mana on your field, and you get Blightsteel Colossus. Since you never cast Blightsteel Colossus, your opponents can't counterspell him. Since he has indestructible, they can't destroy him. But your opponents will try to exile him. So we have a few spells in this deck to counteract that. Rebuff the Wicked, counter a target spell that targets a permanent you control, which would be Blightsteel Colossus. God's Willing, target a creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until the end of turn. Scry 1, again, if they target with a Path to Exile, you can say protection from white, and it will nullify the effect. We also have Shadery Shelter. Target creature you control gains protection from a color of your choice until the end of turn, and it also is a... We also have Benevolent Bodyguard. Sacrifice Benevolent Bodyguard, and target creature gains control protection of a color of your choice until end of turn. Cloud Shift. Exile a creature you control and return that card to the battlefield under your control, so you can blink your Blightsteel Colossus and protect it. We also have 4 more protection spells with Shelter, Apostle's Blessing, Redeem the Lost, and Emerge unshattered. The deck also runs Mask of Avacyn and Swiftboot Boots to give Blightsteel Colossus hexproof. If we get Blightsteel Colossus in our hand, we have Thran Temporal Gateway, a legendary artifact. Pay 4, tap it. You may put a historic permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield, which would be Blightsteel Colossus, so it can't be countered, which is a great bonus. Kaldolfa the Forge Master is also in the deck for the reason of if someone removes your Scrapyard Combiner or Metalwork Colossus and you can't retrieve either one of them, you can sacrifice 3 artifact, tap it, and search your library for a artifact card and put it onto the battlefield, which again, that is going to be Blightsteel Colossus. We also have some untapped spells, so Oswald Fiddlebender can use his effect more than once per turn. Those spells are Burst of Energy, Veteran's Reflex, Jiren's Resolve, Wings of the Cosmos. Since Oswald Fiddlebender sacrifices an artifact, we have some artifacts that can give us card advantage when they are put into the graveyard. And those artifacts are Terrarian, Icor Wellspring, Oregon Spellbomb, Impalement of the Improvement, and Chromatic Star. The deck also runs some generic mana rocks like Gilded Idol, Chromatic Lens, Liquid Metal Tora Q, Fractured Power Stone, Mind Stone, Ura Golem's Eye, Marble Diamond, and Hydron Archive, and Soul Ring. Now, all the cards in this list are under $2, except for some exceptions to make the list function. But Soul Ring is a staple in the list just because Soul Ring is, yes, it's good in every deck, but in this one particular, it allows you to search out 2 mana artifacts with Oswald Fiddlebender, which can be very useful for our finisher. So when we get Darksteel Colossus out on the field, we have some equipments that can make him unblockable, like Executioner's Hood and Prowler's Helm. Also, we have Maul of the Skyclaves, so it can gain flying and first strike, which allows us to one-shot someone without letting them block, which can be super useful to close out games. Next in our list is Foundry Inspector and Joyrus Familiar, which allows us to discard our artifacts in our deck, which can give us a ton of value through how many artifacts are in this deck. We also have artifacts that untap other artifacts like Voltic Tea and Manfold Key, and Volkic Servant, which allows us to untap an artifact at our end step. These artifacts allows us to gain more mana in our mana pool so we can cast our spells more quickly. Now, we do run a few removal spells in the deck, such as Crush Contraband, Return to Dust, and Disenchant, which are spells that remove artifacts or enchantments, or both. But the main one in this deck is Ravnica at War, which exiles all multicolor permanents, which we have none in the deck, so it could remove multiple commanders on the table or multiple creatures, which can be very powerful. Now, since our commander sacrifices artifacts, we benefit from having some creatures that return artifacts from the graveyard. like Myr Retriever, which gets an artifact from the graveyard when it dies. Or Tashar, Ancestor's Apostle, and Scrapyard Trawler, which both get artifacts from the graveyard, which can be great value engines for the deck. Also, Dross Scorpion can also be a value engine in the fact that it can untap artifacts for extra mana. Speaking about extra mana, Cathodian and Gleam's Barrier can be great sacrifice material for extra mana. Microscopic Wellspring also gives us extra mana in the form of basic lands into our hand, and Servo Somatic is also the same effect, but with a token, and those tokens can also be sacrificed to get us one-costing artifacts, possibly like Soul Ring, which can be very useful. And Workshop Assistant is another good artifact in the deck, because when it dies, you get another artifact from your graveyard to your hand, so we can retrieve crucial artifacts that we find that are useful and get them back after we used Oswald Fiddlebender. Now, when Blightsteel Colossus is on the field, it is pretty powerful, but we can make it even more powerful by getting a second Blightsteel Colossus on the field with Sculpting Steel, which allows us to have a second Blightsteel Colossus on the field. We can also use Mirror of the Foreign Bears to get a Blightsteel Colossus for the turn by choosing the creature type Golem and paying 1. This can be a very powerful finisher by having 2 Blightsteel Colossus being able to take out 2 opponents in 1 turn. Since we're in mono white, we don't have a lot of access to ramp in the lands category. Surveyor's Scope is a good artifact to get us some lands by tapping it, exiling Surveyor's Scope, and searching your library for X basic lands cards where X is the number of players who control at least 2 more lands. Put those land cards on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. As I previously said, if your table has any form of green, they will probably be ramping and have more lands than you, because our whole deck is focused around ramping in the artifact instead of lands. So we can get maybe possibly 2 or maybe 3 basic lands from this, which can be super useful. Shimmering Myr is also super useful by allowing the majority of our deck to be played at instant speed. So that allows us to hold our mana until it's almost our turn, and then playing our artifacts, which can give our opponents sort of a nasty surprise. Since we're trying to get Blightsteel Colossus out on turn 5, we're going to have a artifact of 4 costing on the field. So we can sacrifice that to get a 5 costing artifact. And a good 5 costing artifact to get in this deck is Eugen's Nexus. It says if Eugen's Nexus would be put into the graveyard from the battlefield, instead exile it and take an extra turn after this one. So we'll sacrifice our 4 mana artifact and then get Eugen's Nexus, and then the next turn after that we will sacrifice it, take an extra turn, and get a 6 mana artifact that we got from Oswald Fiddlebender, and that will be Gandhi's Aether Heart, which it says whenever Gandhi's Aether Heart or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, get 2 energy counters, and pay 8, exile Gandhi's Aether Heart, and take an extra turn. So all we have to do is play 3 more artifacts on the field, and then we get to take an extra turn. So with these 2 artifacts, we get to take 2 extra turns. So this, in combined with Blightsteel Colossus on the field, allows us to have multiple combat steps, which allows us to take out multiple opponents, which can be very powerful and game ending But if the game goes longer than expected, we have God Pharaoh statue and Lodestone Golem to make our opponent's spell cost more. By God Pharaoh statue, spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life. And also, Lodestone Golem's effect of non-artifact spells cost 1 more to cast. Since our deck is mostly artifact, that doesn't affect us very much. So we can make our opponent's spell cost 3 more to cast, which can be very problematic for our opponents. What's problematic for us, though, is if Blightsteel Colossus leaves the field via exile. So even though we have spells that can and artifacts to protect our Darksteel Colossus, there's still a way for our opponents to get rid of him if they have enough exile spells. So we do have an alternate win con in the deck of Bronze Guardian, which is a double strike Ward 2, and other artifacts you control have Ward 2. His power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. So if we get a lot of artifacts on the field and then give him unblockable, we'll be hitting for a ton of damage. So we have Mishra's Self-Replicator to make Bronze Guard's power even stronger by having, whenever you cast a historic spell, you may pay 1. If you do, create a token copy of Mishra's Replicator, which allows us to have a huge army of 2/2s, and also, as I previously said, buffing our Bronze Guardian. So the deck overall comes around $91, depending on where you buy it from and how damaged or how undamaged your cards are. But I would like to reach out to Commander's Quarters, and if you like this idea and you think you can make a better budget version, which I know is very possible, then I would love to see Commander's Quarters take their best shot and make this Blightsteel Colossus deck even more budget friendly. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's not the best, but this is my first type of video, so I have a lot of work ahead of me to get better at this, but I appreciate you watching all the way through, or watching a lot of it if you did. But have a lovely day, and see ya.